very warm welcome to you this Sunday evening to TV47 Prime. My name is Wakio Mzenge. Our sign language interpreter is Catherine Simaloi. TV47 Prime starts now. Police have launched investigations into the attack on a school bus that was ferrying students of Bienya School on Saturday. And as Joash Onsare now reports, the Deputy Inspector General of Police, Gilbert Masengeli, now says investigations into the attack have commenced.
Several pupils were injured after suspected goons attacked Bienya school bus on Saturday.
What do you do? Take these children to the hospital right away.
Learners were returning from a music festival in Kakamega. Sources indicate the attackers allegedly mistook the bus for one transporting supporters from a political rally held in the area. The Deputy Inspector General of Police, Gilbert Masengeli, now says investigations into the attack have commenced.
Wale goons walifanya hiyo kazi, nataka kuhakikishia polisi wanawafuata na tutawashika, watafikishwa mahakamani.
Political leaders have condemned the stoning of a school bus during an incident at Arambe Market yesterday, terming the act unfortunate and unacceptable.
You cannot succeed by causing violence to children. Yani umekuwa mtu wa roho chafu, umekuwa mtu mfedhuli mpaka mnatupa tear gas kwa watoto wadogo.
Naenda kutoa onyo kubwa kwamba wale wanaotumia vijana wetu wakeuze nguvu zao kwa kuanza kuharibu vitu za wengine. Hatutawasasa. Tutahakikisha hatua imechukuliwa.
They have called on the Deputy Inspector General of Police, Gilbert Masengeli, to expedite investigations and ensure those responsible are arrested and prosecuted.
Sasa mnaenda mnapiga watoto pale Arambe na kupiga mambo ya basi. Na uliza Masengeli, sheria hata iwe ni mimi nisifunje sheria kwa sababu ati niko kwa serikali.
Lazima tuwe na uongozi nzuri. Uongozi ile inaleta watu pamoja, uongozi ile inaleta maendeleo nyumbani, uongozi ile inashirikiana na watu wengine wote dunia mzima ili sehemu yoyote au sehemu zote za nchi inaendelea kwa kiuchumi na kwa maendeleo na utajiri.
The incident, which led to the injury of several students, occurred near Arambe along Mumias Bungoma Highway. Joash Onsare, TV47.
And the National Cohesion and Integration Commission is raising concern over what it describes as a growing wave of political intolerance and violence in the country. The Commission is now urging leaders and citizens alike to reject intimidation and embrace peaceful, issue-based politics ahead of the 2027 general election. Mudhoni Brenda tells us more.
The National Cohesion and Integration Commission has condemned Friday's attack at All Saints Cathedral, describing it as a troubling reflection of a growing culture of political intolerance and violence in the country.
Places of worship and public institutions must remain spaces for peaceful engagement and the free exchange of ideas. An attempt to disrupt lawful gatherings or silence differing opinions through intimidation or violence is a direct affront to the Constitution and the democratic values that bind our nation together.
On Sunday, the Commission warned that the use of intimidation and violence to silence opposing views threatens democratic freedoms, national cohesion, and peaceful political engagement.
Political competition should be guided by ideas, policies, and respectful debate, not coaction, violence, or fear.
According to the Commission, the growing culture of political intolerance and violence demands urgent national attention. NCIC has also turned its attention to young people, cautioning against their involvement in political violence and intimidation.
Kenya's youth are a vital force of innovation, peace, and nation building. Their energy and leadership should be directed towards strengthening democracy and fostering inclusive development rather than advancing division or disorder.
The Commission is reiterating that safeguarding national cohesion is a shared responsibility, calling on all Kenyans to reject violence, embrace tolerance, and uphold the rule of law.
Whenever we call you, you've been coming.
Modhoni Brenda for TV 47.
Still on that matter, the united opposition has condemned what it describes as organized attacks by goons in places of worship. The opposition leaders called on the government to take decisive action against the growing insecurity.
Opposition coalition leaders have accused the government of orchestrating goonism in the country. Speaking in Chwele, Bungoma County on Sunday after attending a holy mass, the leaders accused the government of sponsoring and protecting goons, allegedly responsible for harassing citizens in different parts of the country, including places of worship.
Yoyote ambaye anasimamia uuni magun kama wale walichapa watoto jana Harambee, wao tunataka nambari yao ya simu, their service number. Tukichukua serikali mwaka ujao bila shaka hii Bwana Ruto imeenda, na tutaki wananchi wawe na uumizane wao kwa sababu ya maslahi ya mtu kiongozi mmoja ambaye anajua siku zake za kwenda nyumbani zimefika.
The leaders argued that such acts of invasion and intimidation are undermining peace, national unity and social cohesion.
Mambo ya kubeba tiagas kwa kanisa, kuleta askari na rungu kwa kanisa, nataka kuwaomba viongozi wa serikali na munisikize, ninawaomba kama ndugu yenu na kwa unyenyekevu. Munachiletea laana kufanya maneno ama namna gani wananchi?
DCP party leader Rigathi Gachagua criticized Interior Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen, accusing him of failing to effectively manage the ministry. Gachagua has further alleged that Murkomen is responsible for the growing insecurity and the rise of criminal gangs across the country.
Huyu Murkomen umeweka wizara ya Interior, atachoma nchi hii. Because Wakenya watafika pahali wakatae. Vile wamama niliona jana, as we go towards the elections, Kenyans will say no to goonism.
The leaders would later hold rallies in the area, claiming that if the coalition assumes power after the next election, all those involved in sponsoring or carrying out such acts will face illegal action and be held accountable for their actions.
Police yoyote ambaye anasimamia uuni magun kama wale walichapa watoto jana Harambee, affordable housing ni makateli. Yote haya ya Bwana Ruto ni wizi mtupu. Wizi mtupu. Aende asiende. Aende asiende.
The coalition leaders say they will file a single presidential candidate in the highly anticipated 2027 general elections.
Chwele hoye!
This disturbing growing pattern of attacks in churches and disruption of rallies is really concerning. And that brings us to a conversation that we're having today. Is Kenya a nation of goons? And I'm joined today by a political analyst. Please do introduce yourself.
You give me a very heavy task. My name is Dismas Mukua. I'm a political risk analyst. And thanks for this opportunity. And you brought into fore a very disturbing conversation about the existence of political goons. And I would like to state that Kenya is not a state of goons, although we've got a few parts of society that are encouraging goons. And in my view, goons exist in two levels. Number one, there is the physical goons, and then there is verbal goons. And in physical goons is when people literally come and beat you up, political violence on account of your political ideas. And also when you're talking about verbal violence, again, it's people who are attacking you on account of verbal violence. And right from the word go, any reasonable and rational Kenyan must condemn political goons or political violence, whether it's verbal, whether it's physical, in the strongest terms possible for several reasons. Number one, political violence is a threat to our nation. Political violence is a threat to political stability, economic stability, and the military and security stability. Political violence is a threat to elections. Because if you notice where we have incidences of political violence is what in 2032 may be described as battle areas. Nairobi, Nyanza, Western, and Central. So one would easily come to the conclusion that some architects of the political violence, whether it's verbal or physical, want to use it as a voter suppression strategy. And also they want to be sure and suffocate people who have got character, competence, and capacity. People who can present ideas on the table, they want to frustrate those people. Because if you're a strong person, you've got ideas, you want to present them in the marketplace, but you feel that as soon as you go to the marketplace, somebody is coming to beat you up. You may be reluctant and say politics is a dirty game. And this political violence is not limited to one political party. It cuts across. Because, like for instance, Mr. Rigathi Gachagua, we said, the leader for DCP, he was in Western Kenya, and he actually engaged in verbal violence, and he has done it in the past. You've seen Mr. Rigathi Gachagua attacking a PS, saying that in mboga ya mtu fulani, there is political violence, and also attacking the Nakuru governor. And also he attacked senior politicians in Western Kenya. And then also on the flip side, you have people being beaten up in churches. Sometimes people are having a gathering and they're beaten. So we must condemn it in the strongest terms possible. And the buck stops with President William Samoei Ruto. When he was sworn into office, he said he's going to secure lives and property. And political violence is a threat to lives and property.
Dismas, you've talked about two levels of goonism, the physical and also verbal. We'll get right back to that. Meanwhile, across Kenya's political landscape, a troubling development is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. From disrupted demonstrations and chaotic public gatherings to violent confrontations during political events, the presence of organized groups of goons has emerged as a growing concern. But who are these individuals? Who funds them? And what does their rise say about the state of Kenya's democracy?
On Friday, what was meant to be a solemn and civic-minded budget forum at All Saints Cathedral turned chaotic after groups of suspected goons stormed the event. Midway through the presentations, these rowdy individuals forced their way in. The CCTV footage shows how they forced their way into the church premises, heckling and shouting political slogans. The sanctuary, often regarded as a neutral ground for public dialogue, had hosted a gathering where civil society leaders and citizens were dissecting the government's physical plans.
We ask that everyone, regardless of their position, must respect places of worship, and that the government must put in sufficient effort to ensure that places of worship, like All Saints Cathedral, are protected from political goonism.
Interior and National Administration Cabinet Secretary Kipchumba Murkomen has condemned this disruption, terming the incident unfortunate and unacceptable. CS Murkomen says that the government is redefining the security architecture in Nairobi and other urban centers through the establishment of the Nairobi Metropolitan Police Unit, coupled with the adoption of modern technology and the ongoing modernization of the National Police Service.
We know that Nairobi in the recent past has faced petty thieves and people, pickpockets and some juvenile gangs, even with the CBD. This revamping of the security sector will help us to monitor and capture those people and make sure that we take them to account.
The CS noted that several suspects have already been arrested in connection with the incident, while security agencies continue with investigations and the pursuit of other individuals involved to ensure they are brought to justice. For many Kenyans, however, such scenes have become all too familiar. Peaceful protests suddenly descend into chaos, demonstrators are attacked by unidentified groups, businesses are looted, and citizens are injured. In the aftermath, accusations fly between political rivals. But whose goons are they?
We have not seen tangible arrests, things that can be deterrents, things that can deter the recurrence of this kind of incidences. Worrying more so because of ineffect of police intervention and any other intervention that we are taking as a country. We are seeing this incident multiplying and day by day becoming quite lethal in the way it is executed and in terms of numbers of participants in the incident.
The rise of goons is not a new phenomenon in Kenya. However, recent months have seen a worrying resurgence of politically mobilized youth groups, allegedly hired to intimidate opponents, disrupt public gatherings, and influence public perception through violence and fear.
More than any other time in our national life, goons have overrun our streets, hotels, churches, and people's homes. And we ask, where are we as a people, as a nation?
Analysts argue that goons thrive where accountability is weak and unemployment is high. Kenya's youthful population faces significant economic challenges, with many young people struggling to secure employment. In such an environment, political operatives often find a readily available pool of recruits willing to participate in disruptive activities in exchange for quick financial rewards. The question facing Kenya is no longer whether goonism exists. The evidence is visible in streets and the rallies. The more pressing question, however, is whether the nation is willing to confront it decisively. Will political leaders reject the use of violence as a tool of influence? Will institutions enforce the law without fear or favor? And perhaps most importantly, will Kenya's youth be offered opportunities that make political thuggery an attractive option rather than a survival strategy? The answers to these questions may determine not only the future of political discourse, but also the strength of Kenya's democracy itself. Mudhoni Brenda for TV47.
Thank you, Mudhoni Brenda, for that report. And this issue of goonism becomes a very important conversation. That's why we're having this dialogue with two amazing people who are going to be helping us to understand this better. Earlier on, I introduced our political analyst, Dismas. And right now, I'd like us to introduce another expert who's joined us, a security expert. Welcome to the studio, Byron Adera.
Thank you so much.
We are so happy to have you on board because you are an expert who's been trained in security matters, as well as you are a retired officer, aren't you?
Yes, I am. That's right.
Thank you so much for joining us. This question of goonism, it seems like it's a new trend, but is it? How old is it? And have we experienced it before in other forms, perhaps?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and I'm aligned. I join Dismas here, Brother Dismas, in condemning this goonism that seems to be runaway crime within the territorial borders of this country, Kenya. The question asked as to whether goonism is a new concept. It is not. Goonism finds its footing in the pre-independent states, where the colonial masters used goons, for that matter, to extend their acts of oppression, coercion, illegal taxation, as it were, back then. So this came in the shape and form of chiefs, territorial loyalists that were there at that particular point in time as carries to actually extend what the colonial masters saw as, a concept for rulership. And of course, then you usher in the independence, and what Kanu demonstrated under Kenyatta era was ideally, goonism, by weaponizing ethnic, or rather what you'd call militia, with state power. So basically that was the form of governance, to rain terror on dissidents and people that were not seen to be aligned. And of course you'd want to talk about the Moi era, which was associated with the youth wingers, usher in multipartyism, and of course then there was the blowout of the ethnic, ethnic weaponization, and which of course the composition of militia, which were basically ethnically composed, to actually extend the concept of goonism. Look, post-election violence was one of which that was said to have had a rather very large-scale organization, as the Wakio report did actually say, that there was that which was said to be organized, and of course which caused extreme destruction. If we all remember post-election violence, some of us participated. I remember part of that time was a lieutenant, holding forts in the most, affected regions. I was in Eldoret, and some of the things that did happen were actually happening when you were actually in the theater itself. The loss is untold, as Dismas said before I got on set. If you looked at the economic destruction and every other thing that did happen during that time, 1.5 billion USD in terms of just the economic cost, and the loss of lives attributable to goonism during that particular point in time. So it's not a new concept. What we see is something that's evolved, that Jean-Baptiste said, the more things change, the more they remain the same. Perhaps the playing ground remained different, but the political capital that is actually the driving force of this, which of course then if you look at the political and the social ecosystem that exists in this country today as the baseline for goonism, is something that leaves a lot to be desired, and something that of course then what we have to say, as I'm aligned, has got to be condemned in the strongest terms possible.
And from your experience and the training that you've received, when you look at what is happening on the ground, the gangs and the road blockages and the attacks on the churches, what do you see? Is this the coordinated disruptions? What are you seeing as an expert?
Well, as I said, we've attached too much premium to politics. I mean, the two bedmates right about now, which is the political and the social structures within the society that we live in today, is what is actually the driving force behind this. So we attach too much premium that, you have to win at all costs. And so there's the growing fodder. In a sense, you have over 60% of unemployed and employed youths, because who are goons, if you go to define who goons are? This is the growing, kind of pool of unemployed and unemployed youths that are, of course, not directed. So that's a strong force that you have there in your own hands. And if you looked at what then, the way we are structured as a society, and of course then we attach too much premium to politics, and of course everything goes. We have runaway corruption. So then you turn around and you look at someone who is more than willing to take a shilling to actually just scrap his life by. So it's a game of survival as well. So if you see the political investment side by side with youth that are looking at this space as crime pays and is a viable, employment, then you have the presence of goons serving, and acting as political patronage. But that said, the gravest danger which you now see with the degradation and the corrosion you see in the society today means that no holds are barred. I mean, if you now see people going to church like that, then respect to life doesn't matter anymore. Respect to institutions such as religious institutions, institutions that really did command that level of respect, then it means that we have fallen to a very new low. That in itself is a grave danger, to not just if you looked at them as isolated incidences, which they are not. If you look at them from the national security perspective, yes, we are staring in the face of grave dangers to the country. You've
mentioned the youth, and when we come back, Dismas, please, let's touch on the demographic. Who are these goons was the question that we asked earlier on. Meanwhile, President William Ruto has once again defended his frequent local and international engagements, saying his extensive travel schedule is aimed at accelerating Kenya's economic growth and strengthening the country's influence on the global stage. Speaking during a church service in Kajiado County, the head of state maintained that active leadership requires direct engagement with citizens and international partners.
President William Ruto has dismissed criticism over his frequent travels, saying his movements across the country and abroad are driven by a commitment to transform Kenya's economy. Speaking at Nkarusha Seventh-day Adventist Church in Kajiado County, the president said leadership demands a constant engagement with wananchi, investors and global partners to unlock opportunities for the country. ODM party leader Oburu Oginga, who was also present for the service, equally was in defense of President William Ruto over criticism of his frequent county tours, dismissing claims that the visits amount to premature campaigning.
And Your Excellency, I can tell you that the type of energy you have, moving all over the country, jumping up and down, I have never seen any president doing that since I was born.
Saa zingine wanasema mbona rais amekuja kutoka ng'ambo juzi, amekuja akaenda sijui kufanya mkutano na watu ya Marsabit, ametoka hapo ameenda Kakamega, ndio huyo ako Kajiado, sijui atakuwa wapi. Hiyo ni kazi ambayo mimi niliamua kufanya.
The leader's remarks come as Ruto prepares to travel to France for the G7 summit, where he says he will represent the interest of the African continent. Ruto noted that Kenya has increasingly emerged as a key voice in international affairs, citing major events hosted in Nairobi and the country's growing role in advancing Africa's development agenda.
Ukiangalia diary yangu imejaa miezi 6 mbele kila siku. Lakini ni kwa sababu hii nchi, kubadilika kwa hii nchi inataka bidii.
The president also defended his administration's economic priorities, pointing to increased investments in agriculture, education and healthcare under the 2026-2027 budget, targeted at lowering the cost of living, improving access to education, and strengthening Kenya's competitiveness in the global economy.
We are not going to beg in the international market with a heart in every capital begging. We want to trade with them.
We are making progress, demonstrable progress. Na tumekuwa na favor ya Mungu.
The head of state further challenged Kenyans to embrace hard work and productivity, citing countries such as South Korea, Singapore and Malaysia as examples of nations that have achieved rapid economic transformation through strategic planning and sustained investment. For TV47, I'm Linda Alela.
Opposition leaders drawn from the Linda Mwananchi movement have renewed their criticism of the Kenya Kwanza administration, accusing it of failing to deliver on promises made to Kenyans and worsening the country's economic challenges. Speaking at Kivulini grounds in Thika after a tense encounter earlier at a church service, the leaders also called for greater opposition unity ahead of the 2027 general election. Mike Kagwongo with more details on that story.
With what began with a moment of tension at the AIPCA Cathedral Church in Thika, ended with a strong political message at Kivulini grounds. A brief commotion erupted after opposition leaders, among them Nairobi Senator Edwin Sifuna, Embakasi East MP Babu Owino and MP Majim Kalasinga were initially blocked from accessing the church before later being allowed in. The disruption prompted church leaders to call for calm, with the politicians apologizing before proceeding with their engagements.
Musituharibie ibada yetu. Huwa tunafanya ibada kwa utulivu, na kwa hivyo naomba tafadhali.
Nasema poleni sana, sio kawaida yetu, na tukisonga mbele Bishop vile umetuhubiria hapa, sisi kwa sababu ya hiyo makosa tulijipiga fine tu sisi wenyewe.
Hours later at Kivulini grounds, the leaders turned their attention at the state of the nation, accusing the government of failing to fulfill key promises made to Kenyans.
We are saying, if you are not the problem, you must be part of the solution. Problem yetu ni Ruto.
Wale walikuwa wanauliza mwelekeo wa Linda Mwananchi ni nini? Na waambia mwelekeo inakuja. Na mwelekeo ni Kasonga aende.
The leaders argued that poor leadership remains at the center of many of the country's challenges, urging Kenyans to make leaders accountable for their actions and decisions.
Lakini kwa sababu ya sera za Kasongo, wamewekea hawa industrialists ushuru mzito, mpaka kampuni nyingi hapa zinafungwa, vijana wetu wanapoteza ajira, si ndio?
Na wamama tunasema wakati
wakati wetu ni huu. Wamama tunasema wakati wetu ni huu. Tuungane na Linda Mwananchi tuhakikishe tunashinda asubuhi na mapema.
The rally was also attended by Murang'a Governor Irungu Kang'ata, who praised Linda Mwananchi movement, describing it as a growing national force capable of bringing together leaders and citizens from different political backgrounds.
Kuna mtu aliomba mahali atazaliwa. Sote ni jamii moja. Na ile vuguvugu inasukuma hiyo agenda ni Linda Mwananchi ya Sifuna na Babu. So when I saw Kang'ata today, I know the game is done. Kasongo is gone.
Kang'ata revealed that he had instructed Edwin Sifuna and Babu Owino to initiate talks with Rigathi Gachagua in pursuit of a broader political alliance, days after he claiming that he will not seek re-election on a UDA party ticket.
Kwanza nimeambia huyu rafiki yangu Sifuna wakiwa na Babu na Orengo watafuta wa Munyoro. Sindio? Watafuta nani? Watafuta nani? Mimi hakuna kitu nataka.
Sifuna echoed the call for unity, saying opposition leaders were ready to engage Gachagua and other political players in efforts to build a formidable coalition ahead of the next general election.
Tuweke kura ya Mulima pamoja, tuweke ya kina Kalonzo na Ukambani pamoja, tuweke ya Gen Z pamoja. Wewe jamaa atapitia wapi?
As political engagements continue to take shape, the leaders maintain that unity among opposition forces will be key in challenging the current administration and offering Kenyans an alternative path forward. With Linda Mwananchi leaders intensifying a scathing attack against President William Ruto's Kenya Kwanza government, calls for unity amongst the opposition leaders have also increased on their bid to make President William Ruto a one-term president. Mike Kagwango, TV47, from Kivulini Grounds in Thika, Kiambu County.
That story by Mike Kagwango takes us on a short break. We'll return with more. And remember that we are in studio with Dismas Mokua, who's a political analyst, together with Byron Adera, who is a security expert, and we are discussing this menace called goonism. So don't go too far.
Sundays at 8:30 p.m.
Good morning. You have my rent?
Leo jioni kama tutakuwa tumelipa rent, nauza hii simu yako.
Hamna pesa. I need 3 G's to make my nails today.
Sasa hivi natuhusu aje?
Can I order now? Do you ship? Can I get blinking ones?
Mimi nilikuwa na trade. Nimewekelea kitele yangu. Kitele yangu na trade. Ikakunyoma.
Oh my God. You left me.
Nitumie ni live. Uko nje kuna wifi.
Why? Hi-fi?
Wait, so what do we call this dish again?
I have no idea. The cucumbers are there specifically for my beauty routine.
Tangulini kero umeka kwa beauty product.
Na ameenda.
Tunafaa tukuwe na logo yetu. Like, si ni brand already.
You won't entertain divas. No. I'm not dealing with a man-child.
Amazing. Nishapenda hii energy. Sundays at 8:30 p.m. on TV47. Saturday at 8:30 p.m.
My father used to tell me that our hotel is the home for travelers. I guess I forgot that. Recently, it's been more of a mirror of my own ambition. We might fail. We will probably fail, but not for a lack of trying. So for the last time, and the first time, welcome to Connect In, the best experience in Eastern Central Africa and its environs.
Saturday at 8:30 p.m. on TV47. Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. This is a very serious place.
I see that.
Surely. Hey, Nyumba.
This is the place.
Just for a few days.
Rule number 2.
Kwani Google inajua maisha yangu wewe?
That's my seat.
It's a chair. It was hers.
You're new here? Yes. You learned the rhythm.
This place is run by structure. Structure.
It is a system. Ni venye tu ni system haisikizi.
And what happens if something you haven't chosen enters your day?
I remove it.
That's not always going to be possible here.
Then you are going to have a problem.
Noted.
What are you planning? To escape from a resort?
This is not a resort, my friend. This is a storage.
Wednesdays at 8:30 p.m. on TV47.
I just want to be in the zone.
Nairobi, where the hustle never sleeps and neither do the scammers.
On Link Up, we are talking about something that's affecting all of us.
Indomie, furahia mlo mtamu.
Thank you so much and welcome back. Thank you for keeping it TV47 Prime. Prime Cabinet Secretary Musalia Mudavadi anticipates a decisive petition-free victory for President William Ruto in the 2027 general election. Speaking in Narok County, the Prime CES emphasized that the administration's focus on tangible infrastructure projects such as the standard gauge railway extension continues to strengthen public confidence. Mudavadi urged citizens to register and vote in large numbers to ensure a transparent, legitimate and clear democratic outcome.
Tujiandikishe, tupige kura, tutoke. Mwaka huu tukienda kumalizia, IBC itakuwa na msururu mwingine ama round nyingine ya mwisho ya kumobilize voter registration. Sasa inaendelea, lakini kutakuwa na ile final push. Mimi nataka niwaombe wakaaji wa Narok mjitokeze kwa wingi, wa Kenya wajitokeze kwa wingi. Tuchukue hiyo kura, tuhakikishe kwamba when the election comes in August, mambo hayo tunamaliza kwa round ya kwanza. Not a second round, and we don't want a rerun, and we don't want a petition.
Meanwhile, Kenyans are set to pay less for fuel after the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, IPRA, reduced diesel prices by 10 shillings per litre in its latest monthly review as promised by President William Ruto. The new prices, effective from midnight June 15th to July 14th, place super petrol at 214 shillings and diesel at 223 shillings per litre in Nairobi, while kerosene remains unchanged at 191 shillings. Michelle Mwangi with the details of that story.
Relief is on the way for motorists after the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority, EPRA, announced lower fuel prices for the June-July review cycle. Effective midnight, super petrol will now retail at 214 shillings, while diesel will sell at 222 shillings. Kerosene remains unchanged at 191 shillings and 38 cents per litre. And while prices vary slightly across other regions, the latest review signals broader relief for consumers and businesses grappling with high energy costs. EPRA says the new prices will remain in force until July 14th. The regulator attributes the review to movements in international fuel costs and prevailing market conditions. To cushion consumers from rising global oil prices, the government has injected approximately 10 billion Kenya shillings from the Petroleum Development Levy Fund to subsidize diesel and kerosene. The intervention comes amid growing uncertainty in global energy markets fueled by tension in the Middle East.
Hii nchi ya Kenya, Mheshimiwa Rais, hata tangu vita itokee kule Middle East, hatujawahi kuwa na ukosefu wa mafuta hata siku moja.
Speaking during a church service at Nkarusha Seventh-day Adventist Church in Kajiado County, Energy Cabinet Secretary Opiyo Wandayi has assured the country of sufficient fuel stocks through the end of July. He says the reduction in diesel prices is expected to lower operational costs, as he urged public service vehicle operators to pass the savings on to passengers through reduced fares.
Tunaweza ongea juu ya bei, lakini mafuta yenyewe imekuwepo, Mheshimiwa Rais. Hiyo ni kulingana na uongozi wako na mikakati ambayo umeweka kwa katika serikali yako kuu, Mheshimiwa Rais.
Whether the latest reduction translates into lower transport costs remains the question that many Kenyans will be asking. Michelle Mwangi, TV47, Nairobi.
Governments have been called to prioritize small-scale fishers ahead of the historic Ocean Conference launching in Mombasa. This landmark 11th annual conference marks the first time the global summit convenes on the African continent. Ocean advocate Kate Walsh and marine experts are uniting with local fishing communities to demand enhanced habitat protections, stronger fisheries transparency, and restricted foreign industrial fleets. These critical reforms aim to safeguard local food security, rebuild declining fish populations, and secure vital livelihoods across coastal Africa.
It's the first time that our Ocean Conference has been held on African soil. So the Our Ocean Conference, it's one of the biggest global gatherings of heads of world ocean leaders. So we'll have a lot of political figures there, but we'll have scientists and NGOs and actors also there. The theme this year is Our Ocean, Our Heritage, Our Future. And it's a real opportunity for Africa to lead, for us to show the world what needs to happen in terms of ocean leadership, and for the world to follow us.
Across Kenya's political landscape, a troubling development is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. From disrupted demonstrations and chaotic public gatherings to violent confrontations during political events, the presence of organized groups of goons has emerged as a growing concern. But who are these individuals? Who funds them, and what does their rise say about the state of Kenya's democracy? We get back to our discussion here with Dismas. And Dismas, you had mentioned about the locations that you call the battlefields, or how did you call them again?
Battleground.
The battlegrounds. But there's also a very interesting battleground in the digital space where the intimidation can still happen. Please tell us, as a political analyst, what impact does that look like?
Well, you know, when you're looking at that political violence, whether it's physical, verbal, or now digital political violence, the consequences are almost the same. Because the intention of the architects of political violence is to intimidation, manipulation, misinformation, and disinformation. For instance, you may have so many people who want to run for political office, but because they fear the digital violence or the verbal violence or the physical violence, they'll not offer themselves for election. What does that mean? It means there are people who score an A in this political violence are the ones who get elected into office. And for some reason, there's a good part of Kenyans who actually like leaders who engage in political violence. And they vote for them to get into office, which is unacceptable. In an ideal democracy, you are supposed to have candidates for political office going to the marketplace and selling their ideas, not intimidation, not manipulation, not misinformation, and not disinformation. But for some reason, you'll find Kenyans rewarding these people. They reward them, they give them a political office. And that is why it's critically important for the responsible officers, the Inspector General of Police, to engage in proactive investigation, which is led by intelligence, and ensure that you do not only arrest what you may call watu wa mkondo or Kandamoko or Jolwedo, the guys who engage in the actual work, but the people who sign on the dotted lines, the people who give them money. Because when you speak to scholars and practitioners, they say there is evidence that these guys who engage in violence, they do not move on their own motion. They must be given resources. And then for some of these
politicians who've got a lot of political power, immense political capital. When they speak, then everybody within their rank and file, they start engaging in insults. And that is the reason why you find the majority of people don't want to run for political office. And also this political violence is used for voter suppression. Because somebody would say, why would I wake up early in the morning to go and cast my ballot if on the way I'm going to stop a bullet or somebody is going to give me a beating? So they decide to stay at home. And in my view, if the responsible officers under President Ruto does not take proactive action, then this political violence, anchored in misinformation and disinformation, may corrupt the elections for next year, and Kenyans will not get the leaders that they deserve. Kenyans will get people who have scored in political violence. And if that is the case, and there's again, studies have been done. There's a thin line between political violence and meritocracy. If Kenya wants to go to Singapore, if you want to create wealth and employment opportunities for everybody else, you must place a premium on meritocracy. Majority of people who have meritocracy have no time for political violence. People who have challenges in meritocracy, people who have challenges with character, capacity, and competence, place a huge premium on political violence. And there are a number of initiatives across Kenya. Like, for instance, there's a gentleman called Bosire. Bosire is an ODM official who comes from Kisii. They're establishing now committees to vet leaders at a community level, at a county level, that if there is evidence that you've ever participated in political violence, evidence you've ever stolen somebody's cow, then they'll put a red flag on your name so that you're not elected to office. Believe you me, the three of us here, all of us will know the candidates who are offering themselves for election from the MCA level who scores an A in political violence. Why can't we call them out? And I think we have an ethical responsibility in the media as analysts not to place a premium on people on political violence. For instance, I come from Western Kenya. Why would a politician go to a matanga and cause political violence? You may be surprised to know that in Kisii, some politicians have been banned from attending matangas on account that when they open their mouths, they insult everybody. And I think we need more of those proactive actions. And if, as a nation, we are not proactive, then we are about to join Haiti in that WhatsApp group.
Dismas, you mentioned that there is a group of Kenyans who actually want to vote for politicians who are associated with the violence. Why do you think that is so?
Well, you know that in some societies, and he's a retired officer, there are some people who say they want macho men, they want macho women, they want men and women who can insult everybody. That is the kind of politics they want. Like, for instance, when somebody who has served once at the presidency, who has been impeached, takes a podium and you insult a female governor, you insult a female PS by suggesting that the female PS has got some nocturnal activities with other leaders. Can you imagine if you're the PS or if you're the governor watching news at home with your husband or with your wife or with your children, and a politician does this, and then it's picked on by some digital warriors and it's spread all over? That is unacceptable. And guess what? For some reason, these people are not punished. There's no pecuniary punishment. There's no criminal punishment. These are the people we give a pat on the back, and when they post those things on social media, they get immense following. Sometimes they monetize political violence. Because if I insult you right now, and then I post it on social media, people will be curious to find out.
And it trends. Gets a following, advertisements run against. And
there's monetization. So maybe even at this stage, we need to talk to these people who run social media companies and organizations, that there's some content which is unacceptable. Some countries like the UK is about to come up with that policy, and also Australia, whereby if you're posting this kind of content, it's unacceptable. And we must not confuse free speech with warmongering, with verbal violence. We need to call out these people, because if I'm elected to office on account of my capacity to beat up people at a funeral, during those 5 years, I don't need to deliver on anything, because you voted for me knowing that my key performance indicator is verbal attacks, misinformation, and disinformation. So why should I perform? Because I'll just go sit on my back, make money, so that I can recruit more people in my wing, and then after 5 years, I'll engage in political violence. That is why we have to say times above number till the cows come home. that we must start rewarding ideas and opinions. If you want to create wealth in Kenya, if you want to create employment opportunities, if you want to shine at an international level, you must place a huge premium on ideas and wealth. You know, there's some, as we said, these politicians exist across. For instance, if you look at the United Opposition, look at Kalonzo. When Kalonzo speaks, you see a gentleman. You don't see political violence. But you cannot say the same about Mr. Rigathi Gachagua. The two are polar opposites. In fact, you ask yourself, how do they sit together? So in my view, Kenyans must vote with their selfish interest in mind, and their selfish interest is that meritocracy, capacity, competence, and character. If we just fall in love, you know, there's the Stockholm syndrome, that we fall in love with our captors. Yeah. Majority of our captors are the ones who share in political violence. So we fall in love with them, and then we sit back and start yawning. How come? Do you know, by the way, some governors, and we will not name names now, have a frustrating freedom of the media. Do you know there are so many journalists in Kenya who don't have capacity to report accurately on issues from their counties on account that if the story runs out, if the story ends, those governors will go and give them a beating. While the Constitution provides for freedom of speech, freedom of association, a number of governors, and we warn Kenyans that a number of governors will become warlords. When they go to the podium, they say freedom of speech. But when you speak to the journalist privately, hey, this must be story nikifanya, kitaniramba. So imagine what political violence is doing in Kenya.
Dismas, you've also mentioned that we need to stand up and condemn it with the highest terms, that we need to collectively agree that this is not the direction that we want our country to go. So we've had the government insisting that it condemns goonism. The Interior CS Murkomen has directed the Inspector General to act very fast. Do you think that the public believes this?
Before Brian comes in my view, words count for nothing. Words count for zero. We must see action. You know, and Brian has given a good description from 1963. You've had these political violences in many shapes and forms. Tell me, if there's anybody today as we speak serving time behind bars at committee on account of assaulting a female candidate, on account of assaulting a male candidate, on account of sponsoring political violence. What happens is, in this political violence, there's tier 1, the guys who give the resources, and then the tier 4 guys who do the actual work. A few of the guys who get arrested are tier 4 guys. And guess what? They have no idea who's told them to go and cause a friction. Because, let me ask you, how do you find that in a political rally, there's somebody with a grenade? Where does this come from? How do you find in a political rally, somebody comes with ile miti ya jembe, you know, cracking skulls? Where does it come from? And you know, basic investigations. And as Brian will tell you, Kenya has got very solid military and security forces. Intelligence has no peers. Are you telling me that the responsible officers have no idea of who are the architects of political violence? That they're just snapping like the rest of us Kenyans? And yet, look at the recent budget. They've been given resources in truckloads. Truckloads. So are you suggesting to me that they have no idea who is the architect of political violence? And are you suggesting to me that the Inspector General, sitting at his office, is happy when he sees schoolboys, schoolgirls, an old lady going about her business, being given a beating on account of her political beliefs? You saw not long ago a lady and the son shared a tattoo of the head of state. We're talking about casualties. And I don't know whether there's anybody behind bars. You remember there used to be a program, I'm not going to mention the name of the TV station, that iwe funzo kwa wengine. I don't know whether, as a security expert, whether there's any funzo kwa wengine right now.
Maybe he should tell us right now. What has been your experience?
Well, thanks for the very interesting question, and of course the assertions that are made by Dismas speak to a number of very concerning developments, so to speak. The insidious threat that goonism causes, especially with the normalization of goonism or wanton destruction and even death, coercion, and intimidation, is something that's dangerous. And I mean, yes, I highlighted some of the examples here, that when we simplify some of these weighty issues and then normalize them and rationalize them, eventually obviously normalizing them, then it becomes a danger. The very fact that crime seems to pay, and the bigger the crime, it pays more. And of course, based on the altar of political sanctification of that criminality, or those acts of criminality, you know, the bedmates that goonism and the political enterprise is really dangerous, because politics and the political element of national power, if you looked at the whole sum total of the elements of national power, is really one of the defining elements of power. What Dismas has also said in terms of the political elements being elected and the people who show up and beat people up in, you know, funerals, he's spoken of a monkey essentially. And you cannot elect that monkey without being one, as it said. So the electorate need a lot of, and of course, you know, to him that much is given, much is expected. Yes, we have to judge these things based on who then has the biggest responsibility and who then has their back being the ultimate stopper. It is people who have the ultimate responsibility, and so getting to whip them into order has a lot of things that than just calling them out. It is the strengthening of the institutions that have got to actually bite. Electoral reforms, and I think in a jury is still out on how much we have in terms of just laws and regulations. We have an overkill of them, but the operationalization of the same is where we actually stuck in the mud. So strengthening of these institutions beyond just electoral reforms, you know, we have institutions such as the NCS, you know, we have the NCIC, you know, the National Cohesion and Integration Commission. Seem not to, beyond the educational perspective and the mediation, they should actually be having the power to actually just, you know, grab people, take them before the arc of justice and get people to be set, you know, a date for in the prisons that we have. I mean, we have far too many as well. So if you look at the architecture that this goonism is growing on, and the ecosystem and the field that really just does inspire this, and the question that you just did ask as well at the beginning, it may seem very, very rational, but the rationalization of the same is actually stuck in some of the research elements that have been done. In 1982, we had a gentleman, Magaji, that did, you know, come up with a framework that did talk about a vast array of elements of psychological research, and most of which are really just, you know, having their bed in Project Kenya. If you talk about the instigators of acts of aggression, so the sum total of internal motivations, there are far too many. The motivations in terms of money, we talked about the population that's unemployed, underemployed, and that do not have the sense of hope anymore. And anything that then does come in terms of, you know, a dominant aspiration, because where we socialize as a country, for you to make it, then you got to be actually having, you know, a good family with feed sense, you know, school, the normal things, beyond just the basic needs. Drive a big car. These internal motivators in terms of just the money and of course the lack of fear of the consequences that exist, that anything goes, the impunity that seems to be run away, seems to benefit people with that internal motivation. The second factor is habit strength factors, which of course the sum total of, you know, things that you learn out of reward and observation. So habit strength factors, they do exist. If you look at the people that is highlighted, the monkeys that essentially are beating people in funerals and things like that, we're talking about people who are hot-wired. The whole development of human beings mean that we are, you know, going through what you call the cold circuitry. Hot circuit is where you have wild animals that will do crazy things in the spur of the moment. Now, cold circuit doesn't seem to exist in the humans that are being defined here. So the habit strength factors exist. Now, the stimuli in the external environment that seem to facilitate acts of criminality and aggression seem to also exist, an overkill of them. Now, if you look at that, you add those three, the stimuli that facilitate rather than the inhibitions and the stimuli that inhibit acts of aggression, then you arrive at the algebra of aggression as put by...
And Byron, that description actually gives us the characteristics of the goons.
Yes, absolutely.
But now let's look at the demographic.
Yeah.
We are talking about the youth who are actually participating in goonism.
Yes.
And these are the same people, when we talk about the Gen Z revolution, are the same people that are actually going to bring reforms in our governance, and they're pushing for it as well. What do you make of that? Let's say that as our parting shots, because time is really not on our
Perfect.
side.
So then if you look at the anatomy of goons, it's really people who have the muscle, and you're looking at the age between 8, and you can push it below 18. I mean, if you look at some of the criminal gangs that have been highlighted, there are boys that have just gotten out of school, some have dropped out of school, some from primary school, secondary school, and even just tertiary levels. So between, I would say, quite honestly, 10 to perhaps 35, the able-bodied individuals. And sorry to say this, again, at the backdrop of the Men's Mental Wellness Month, majority of goons are men.
No.
Not many, not more times. I think there's a growing number, yes, of females, but then you have... So if you were to ever look at how to morally rearm as a nation, you would have to really ask the hard questions that how do we whip up, you know, everybody else in the society to morally rearm. From that perspective, I think we should be having a very strong baseline to actually start doing the right thing.
Thank you so much.
2 quick words.
Let's go to Dismas.
Political parties must discipline architects and beneficiaries of political violence. EACC must do the same, because I think it falls in their brackets. And then also IBC must stop people from running on account of political violence. But more important, voters must reject any form of political violence. Because if somebody scores an A in political violence, verbal violence, digital violence, believe you me, that person has no capacity to transform your life. And whether you're running for president, whether you're running for MCA, we must call out. We need gentlemen. You know, at some stage you were being told, you remember the way they described Musalim Davadi, a gentleman in the Kenyan political space. We need gentlemen and we need ladies that we know them about their ideas and opinions. At some stage, a CEO in Kenya said that Kenyans are peculiar and he got a beating. But I think sometimes our voting patterns reflects peculiar. Somebody has stolen Mura's cow, cannot be the chairman of a cattle dip. During the election process, we vote for them. When they're arrested by EACC, we go and demonstrate. Tunasema mwizi wetu. And this person has stolen resources which are supposed to buy drugs for you. When your family members die of a disease, when they die of malaria, then you wait for the same politician to come to your funeral and insult people by making 90-year-old women line up to be given 100 bob. I mean, what? I don't know whether I should say that we lose our rationality. How do you reward political violence? This guy who was engaged in political violence will go and steal your entire budget.
Yeah.
There are no hospitals. There are no roads. Nothing works. All the money has gone into his pocket. Your relatives die. When it comes to the funeral, you know the way they go to the funeral in the countryside? They come with their mobile toilets, they come with the velvet seats, and then they give you money, and then you clap for them. Stockholm syndrome. I know we can talk about this till the cows come home, but we must place a huge premium on character. Because what we're discussing here, political violence, verbal violence, and the digital violence means there is no character, both for the leaders we elect, and at some stage, the voters.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me in this conversation and for your insights as well. Those were concrete, very concrete action points that we've been given by Dismas on how we should actually can be able to reverse this. You know, you talked about choosing the right leaders.
Character, capacity, and competence, you can call it the 3 C's.
The 3 C's.
But it must
right
be
there.
anchored on meritocracy. You know, you can have somebody who has character, capacity, and competence, but there's no meritocracy.
Thank you so much, gentlemen. That was a lovely conversation and very insightful as well. I look forward to having you guys again so that we can expound on this conversation even more. Thank you so much for joining us as well. This has been TV47 Prime this Sunday evening. I'm Wakio Mzenge, and our sign language interpreter was Catherine Simaloi. From all of us here in the studio, we want to wish you a good night.